2, 1.
Good evening, my friends. We are live. This is the Eli King Show. It is June 7th, and today we will have a special guest, sovereign citizen Alfred Adask. The guy's a wonderful, wonderful man, and it will be an honor. Let's see if we can punch him up on Skype now. You can also read his articles at adask.wordpress.com. He should be standing by and awaiting the call so that we can give you this wonderful information that the FDA deems us as animals. He has a lot of information on that. It's pretty weird, I tell you. All right, are we on the air with Mr. Adask?
I hear you. I don't know if you hear me or not, and I've just had a problem with my computer. Let me see if I can get the video to work on this. You want video, is that true?
If possible, yes, but I do hear you loud and clear, and that is wonderful, sir.
Okay, if that's good enough, then I won't go any further because something just happened with a video on this thing, and I wasn't sure if I'd even be able to answer the phone just now. Something froze up on the computer. So if this is good enough, let's leave it as it is, and we'll proceed from here. How's that?
All right, sounds good to me, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, wonderful. All right, sir, as I was just telling my audience, Mr. Alfred Adask, you are a sovereign citizen, and I was telling my audience as well that the FDA deems us as animals, and I would like you to elaborate on that a little if you can, sir.
Sure can. It's something I discovered back in 2006. I volunteered to be fiduciary for a trust that was a defendant in a lawsuit that was being prosecuted by the Attorney General of the state of Texas against, at the time, 6 defendants. A man, a wife, and their corporation, another man and his corporation and his trust. And I volunteered to be fiduciary for his trust so I'd have standing to speak in court. But when I did, much to my surprise, they added me as the 7th defendant in this case. All right. This case started in 2001. It was against a husband, wife, and their corporation, and they were charged with the manufacture and distribution of a controlled substance. This was a civil suit. It wasn't criminal, but it was based on the same law that you would apply if you were dealing with heroin, cocaine, pot, whatever. In the case, and each of the defendants was threatened with fines of $25,000 per day. That's $9 million per year per defendant. So I come along 5 years later, and I get involved in the case, and I'm made a defendant, much to my surprise. And now it focuses your mind quite a lot to be sued for $9 million a year by the Attorney General of Texas. And I read the relevant lawsuit. I'd been studying. But it focuses your mind, and I read the lawsuit, and it says in part, it says the key to this case is determining, as a matter of law, whether or not colloidal silver, and that was the controlled substance that was being manufactured. Colloidal silver, if you or your audience don't know, it's just distilled water with silver ions in it. And these ions give it an antibiotic effect. It's a cheap and effective antibiotic that deals with hundreds of diseases and afflictions, and the FDA wanted it off the market, and they instructed the Attorney General of Texas to go after the first 3 people, again, husband, wife, and their corporation. And later, a couple years later, they sold some of their equipment, not the business, but some of their equipment to another man. And then the government added him and his corporation and his trust because he bought some of their equipment, added them as 3 more defendants, and then I got into it, and I was the last and 7th defendant. I was added in 2006. I read the relevant law, and it says the key to the case is determining whether colloidal silver is a drug, as described at Title 21, Section 321 of the United States Code. Also, they had the section for the Texas law. and I don't remember what section it is off the top of my head, but Texas also has a law that defines drugs, and it's virtually word for word identical with the federal definition. So they brought these two up, and I read through and I start reading the first definition, and I come to a phrase, and it says man or other animals. This definition of drugs applies to man or other animals. And my first reaction was, why, you damn fools, you don't even know how to write. If I said a horse or other animals, it makes perfect sense. We know that animals is a large generic class that includes all kinds of animals, including horses. Horse or other animals makes sense. A cow or other animals makes perfect sense. A rock or other animals doesn't make sense because we know a rock is not an animal. So when they wrote man or other animals in the law, they are defining man to be an animal. And the first time I saw it, I thought, why, you damn fools. Like I said, I thought you don't even know how to write. And then I kept reading in the definition, and it says it a second time. And then I read the Texas definition, and it says it the same thing. Twice it says man or other animals. And I realized, my God, the government views us as animals. Now, most people won't understand the significance of this, because if you've been taught to believe in the theory of evolution, you're going to sit back and say, well, yeah, we are all animals. Well, there's a problem with that. I'm a Christian, Protestant in particular. In Genesis 1:26 through 28, it says, on the sixth day, God created man in his image and gave man dominion over the animals. And that means that as a Christian or Jew, or any other faith that traces back to that verse in the Bible, you can't call me an animal without violating my freedom of religion. It is a fundamental premise, the Christian faith, that man and man alone is made in God's image. And we are given dominion over animals, which means we can't be animals. And the significance of this is seen in Genesis 9:6. when it explains why you can't murder a man. And the reason, going all the way back into Genesis, is it says at Genesis 9:6, it says the reason you can't kill a man is because he's made in God's image. That's the reason murder is illegal. On the other hand, if you're only an animal, we can kill you anytime we want. It's no big deal. It's like slaughtering cows to make hamburgers for McDonald's. It's no big thing to kill animals. It's an enormous thing to kill a man made in God's image. We can look at this in slavery, of course, was based on the idea that blacks were animals, and as such they could be property. We can look at the Nazi era in Germany, 1930s. 1935, they passed the Nuremberg Act, or Nuremberg Laws, where they defined the Jews to be Untermenschen. And Untermenschen means under. Unter means under, and Mensch means man. It means subhuman. It means animal. Once you define people as animals, you can kill them all. You can kill the men, the women, the children, the non-combatants. It makes no difference. It's like exterminating a hive of wasps or a nest of rats. If they're animals, you can kill them all. It's not a problem. So when the government comes along and says, oh, we've decided to define you people as animals, it gives the government enormous power over the people. It effectively strips us of any meaningful rights. So, I drafted a freedom of religion defense based on this insight and argument. And the Attorney General's office had been sending us paperwork. We'd get her every 2 to 6 weeks. We'd get another wad of paper from the Attorney General, certified mail, and it was unnerving. They keep on sending you this stuff for another hearing or whatever. And you're being sued for, $25 million, $9 million a year, excuse me. And it's unnerving, and when we sent this defense in, the Attorney General's office went dead silent for 5 months. They didn't send us anything. And then, when we finally did go back to court, the chief administrative judge for Travis County, which is the seat of government for the state of Texas, He took over the case. He held it for 5 months. He worked throughout that 5 months. He tried to scare us initially, and then he shifted gears, and he tried to talk us into an out-of-court settlement. And he says, I've virtually never done this before. And he tried to persuade us to go to an out-of-court settlement, and we wouldn't agree. And finally, they had 2 hearings on jurisdiction. They claimed to have jurisdiction, and then they just dropped the case, and we never heard from them again. Now, they'd invested almost $500,000 and 6 years in this case before they dropped it. And the implication is that this is evidence that the argument has enormous political power, and they didn't want to touch it in open court.
Yes, it makes absolute sense, Mr. Adask. They did not want to.
You can call me Al. You don't have to be calling me Mr. Adask.
I'm sorry, sir.
It's all right.
It is
don't
an
have
honor.
To call me sir either. I work for a living, you know.
You got it. All right. I lost my train of thought here. But anyway,
we're just talking about this stuff. It's an extraordinary discovery. And I'll tell you something else. We look back. We found 5 other states that we checked at the time, and every one of them had identical laws. They all presumed us to be animals. I'm sure there might be a couple of exceptions, but basically I'll bet you at least 45, 48, 49 of the states have drug laws that are based on the presumption that the people are animals.
So the main point here is, folks, he was able to beat this case on a religious defense.
Yeah, freedom of religion. Exactly.
Because the FDA deems us as animals,
Yep.
and they did not want that exposed.
That's
they do
exactly
not
right.
want the people to know that the FDA deems you as an animal. Now,
Yep.
Mr. Adask, let's see if we can take some phone calls. Let's throw the number up,
Go ahead.
because I want to see if the people can get some
Let me tell you another word that's defined while you're running those calls trying to get somebody to give us a call. Let me tell you another word that is
ahead.
defined based on the presumption that you are nothing but an animal.
Go ahead, sir.
Food. Food. Both food and drugs are defined with man or other animals, and you can find both of those definitions at Title 21, Section 321 of the United States Code. They're both in there, both food and drugs. The entire FDA, Food and Drug Administration, is based on the presumption that you are nothing but livestock. This is an act of genocide. I've read the law on genocide. We aren't going to probably have time to explain it right now, but this is an act of genocide, just the same as when the Nazis declared the Jews to be Untermenschen. Our government has declared us to be animals, and it's not new. This goes all the way back, at least as far as I've been able to tell. The earliest instance we found is the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act. And you can Google that. 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act. You can Google it and it'll come up. And you look for Section 6. And they define both food and drugs in terms of man or other animals. The government has presumed us to be nothing but livestock for over a century. To the best of my knowledge, I'm the first man to read that law and realize what it meant on a spiritual basis. And the reason they don't want us to find out about it is because it's not just about the whole war on drugs is based on the presumption that we're all livestock. You understand that? But it goes bigger than that. It means that the prison industrial complex is largely based on that presumption. 70% of the people in federal penitentiaries are there on drug-related crimes. None of those crimes will stand up, none of those convictions will stand up if the people understood the significance of Title 21, Section 321 of the United States Code, the definition of drugs and food. All right? The prisons would be largely evacuated. That's an industry that involves millions of tons of concrete and steel. They could cut the prison population at least in half if the government was forced to admit that they can't treat the people like animals. Then you go on and you talk about pharmaceutical industry. All of the drugs that we get that are manufactured by pharmaceutical industries, by corporations, they're all based on the presumption that you and I are nothing but animals. That's billions of dollars of profit every year that are based on the presumption. That's how they can prescribe. That's how they can restrict. They can control the animals. They can't control the men and women who are made in God's image. All right? We are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights as declared in the Declaration of Independence, but there's no such endowment for animals.
All right, sir. It appears we have a phone call. Let's see if he has a question for you. Hello, sir. You are on the air. Do you have a question for Alfred?
Hey, Elias, Luigi.
Hey, Luigi. What's going on? Calling all the way from Detroit. I have no other than Mr. Alfred Adask on the show. He's made appearances on the Alex Jones Show, 60 Minutes. And, yeah, he's on the air with you and I, Luigi. You have a question for him?
Yes, Mr. Adask. How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm just wondering, who determines what race of man is what type of an animal? And these people, what do they consider themselves?
I assume they consider themselves also to be animals. This is, from my perspective, this is evidence of spiritual warfare. It's an absolute denial of fundamental principles we find in the Bible. This is an insult to God. It is a denial that you and I are made in God's image. Insofar as we cooperate with this definition, it's arguable. I won't say it's true, but it's arguable that we are essentially turning our back on God. Now, most people don't understand it. Like I say, it's been around since 1906. Been around for over a century, and so far as I know, I'm the first one to pick up on it. And that's with the grace of God. Good Lord sometimes lets me see things. I spotted it in 2006. A century it's been on the books, and nobody seems apparently grasped the meaning.
Why is such a big deal about colloidal silver and like old-fashioned type remedies? Why is the government so
because it's cutting into the profits of big pharmaceutical corporations, and the FDA is essentially a lackey working for the big pharmaceutical corporations. The guy that they originally sued, he was probably the biggest manufacturer of colloidal silver in the country at the time, and they wanted to make an example of him in order to scare everyone else who was making colloidal silver. This was a politically motivated case and instituted by the FDA, conducted by the Attorney General of the state of Texas. And we got into it, and I read the law, and found something just amazing. So just extraordinary.
Absolutely.
Are we in legal trouble if we make our own homemade colloidal silver?
Yeah, in theory, they could regulate you on that basis insofar as they presume you to be an animal. All right? They can regulate you the same way the farmer can regulate the cows in the pasture behind the barn. If he wants to give you a shot, he'll give you a shot. And if he doesn't want to give you a shot, he won't give you a shot. And if he wants to feed you cattle food that includes part of the whatever waste products are left over after they chopped up the other cows, he can feed you the waste products from other cows. He can do what he wants because he's the farmer and you're an animal.
Well, I think it's about time we all take responsibility for our own food and our own water and everything else that goes into our body.
Well, what's important, I agree with what you're saying, but what's important is you have to take responsibility for understanding your own status and how the government perceives you. And you have to take responsibility for devising ways where you can tell them, I am not an animal. I am a man made in God's image, as per Genesis 1, 26 through 28. And they can't stop you on this because this is freedom of religion. It is a fundamental principle of the Christian faith. Genesis 1, 26 through 28. Man is made on the sixth day. Man alone is made in God's image, and man is given dominion over the animals. If you're a Christian or a Jew, you can't be an animal without violating your freedom of religion. The other point is our Declaration of Independence says we hold these truths to be self-evident. Second sentence, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That endowment goes to men, men made in God's image. It does not go to animals. If you allow yourself to appear in the capacity of an animal and you want to complain about liberty, or you want to complain about your right to life, or your pursuit of happiness, guess what? No one in the courts is going to listen. It's like listening to a parrot claiming that it has certain rights, and people just laugh about it. Isn't that cute? Put the parrot in a cage where he belongs and he can complain about the rights he thinks he has.
Great answer, sir, and I don't want to take up any more time. Thank you, Eli. I will listen next week, and God bless you all. Thank you.
I appreciate the call, Luigi. God bless. This is why I have this flag as my background. It's a revolutionary flag, an appeal to heaven, because I've made so many appeals to the federal government. I can only appeal to the Most High now. I can only appeal to heaven. You understand where I'm coming from?
I absolutely do, and it's something that's hard to imagine. I published a magazine called The Anti-Shyster. Started in 1990, and I published it until 2002. And I managed to support myself, barely, publishing that magazine. I was pretty proud of that. But early on, I published the magazine, and it was critical of the judicial system, lawyers and judges. And people would write to me, and they would talk to me about spiritual warfare, and I didn't understand it at the time. They'd talk to me. I knew they were sincere. I knew they knew something, but it was not something I knew about. But over the years, since then, now 24 years, I understand the concept of spiritual warfare far more than I did in 1990. And I see it, and it's encouraging to me to see evidence of spiritual warfare, because it tells me that God is real. This is no small thing. Your government is trying to oppress you by calling you animals, defining you to be animals. The other definition that you can find at, again, Title 21, Section 321 of the United States Code, you can also find a definition for devices, man or other animals. These devices are what they use in medicine. They mean medical devices. It means that all of American medicine is based on the presumption that you are nothing but livestock. This may explain why they can put you on an operating table, and a man can cut into you with a knife, and if you die, too bad for you. There's no criminal liability. It may be, I'm just speculating, I don't know this to be true, but it may be there's no criminal liability because they understand and believe you are just an animal. You're not going to see a doctor, you're going to see a veterinarian who specializes in primates. That's the implication. I won't say that's the law, but that's the implication.
Is this why they try to pump us with the flu shots that have the mercury and the
why not?
And
just livestock, you're just livestock. It's no big deal. If you die, you die. Yeah. If you spend 10, 15, 20 years of your life in the slammer because you were smoking pot, who cares? You're nothing but livestock. They can do these things to us if they operate under under the definitions that we find at, again, Title 21, Section 321. I say it over and over again, but hopefully there's some people in the audience who write it down, and you can look it up. Just type 21 USC 321 into the Google search engine. It'll take you to that section of Title 21. 21 USC means United States Code 321. You type that in there and you scroll down, and you have to get down. The definitions are item F, G, and H or I, down in that vicinity. And you'll find a definition of food, definition of drugs, and definition of devices, and they mean medical devices. And every one of them is based on the presumption that you are an animal. And if you are, you don't have any more rights than a dog in the street.
It is really repugnant, and I try to explain this to my audience all the time, how the CIA ships in the drugs, and then they lock you up for using the drugs they shipped in, and it's all because, I guess they deem us as animals.
Yes. See, government can rule right over. If we're nothing but livestock, they can absolutely rule over us.
All right, what can we do, sir? We're running out of time. What can we do to
Well,
fight
first thing
this?
you got to do is educate yourself and see what I'm talking about and verify in your own mind that what I've just said is true. And that means you go to Title 21, United States Code, Section 321, read the relevant definitions, and you will say, oh my gosh. Find the definition of drugs in your state. You're up in New York, aren't you, Eli?
Yes, sir.
Well, look up the New York definition and see what they've got for state definition of drugs. All right? You'll
Wow.
discover almost certainly the same thing that we see in the federal law. And then if you can get right with God, essentially, and you can begin to make arguments, you can begin to understand this is spiritual warfare, and they don't want to hear about it. They don't want to take this in front of a jury. You raise this line of defense. It's not, we didn't win our case because we were superior litigators. We won because we raised an argument that was so politically hot that they didn't want to risk touching it in court. They don't want it to go in front of the public. They don't want a defendant to stand out and explain to the jury that the government thinks everybody, including the jurors and their wives and their children and their parents, are all nothing but livestock. That comes up and the jury's going to say what? And they're going to start looking at the prosecutor and looking at the judge and say, you think we're all just livestock? You get this definition down and you can stop a lot of prosecutions. And not necessarily, I mean, it's not a guaranteed situation. The government is tricky, they're sneaky if you're not really up to speed. All right? And maybe even a little bit blessed, you can be beat.
But it's a good point, and I think we all should fight and use this to fight against these illegal drug wars, this disgusting war on drugs through jury nullification. All right, sir, we're basically out of time. Tell my audience anything else, any websites, any...
Oh, you can go up and visit. I have a blog at Adask, adask.wordpress.com. And if you look on the list of categories over on the right-hand side, top of the list is man or other animals. And you can click on it, and it will take you to 20 or 30 different articles I've written on the subject over the past several years. And if you go to the earliest ones, go all the way back to the earliest ones, you will find a copy of the paperwork that I submitted into court. And again, we stopped a case where the Attorney General of Texas had invested 6 years and $500,000. Nobody else has done that.
Wow. All right, sir. Well, I appreciate your time. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I thank you for appearing on the show with Mr. Adask. It has been an honor. God bless you, sir.
Thank you.
You're the best. All right, people, join me every week. Hit the bumper music. Join me every week, Saturdays, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, only on MNN.org. Also, go to adask.wordpress.com. This guy has tons of great information. God bless America. God save the United States Constitution. And if you have received this transmission, then you are the resistance.